Ant-Man and his costume might be more complicated than the rules of baseball. There's just so much to take in. On top of that, the nature of Ant-Man's powers means his suit experiences stress that other Marvel superheroes don't have to deal with. With Ant-Man and the Wasp hitting theaters soon, we thought you might want to know some of the weirder attributes regarding Ant-Man's suit. Before we begin, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to become a member of our notification squad so you'll never miss a video. Without further ado, let's explore what's up with Ant-Man's suit.
First off, I'm a big fan.
All about the suit. If you're not a hardcore nerd and just checking out comics for the first time, you should know that the whole AntMan saga is fundamentally different from a lot of other superheroes in the vast, multi-dimensional expanse of Marvel Comics. For example, think Spider-Man and you think Peter Parker, not Peter Parker and a bunch of other people at the same time. That's because, in the Prime Marvel Universe, aka Earth 616, Parker is who Spider-Man is most of the time. Yes, there's Spider-Gwen, aka Spider-Woman, but if you want to find other people who call themselves Spider-Man, you have to travel to other dimensions in the multiverse, which represent spin-offs, where they reset the world so the writers have more room to play. In his own universe, Spider-Man had to die before he's replaced by a clone named Ben, or he has to retire before passing the torch to a young Miles Morales. Ant-Man, however, is more about the costume, the suit itself. Hank Pym, the scientist who became the first Ant-Man, invented only one suit at first, but its underlying technology allows him to create other suits for his wife Janet, his daughter Hope, and his friend Scott Lang. Like Iron Man and Venom, the characters and their choices revolve around the suit, rather than their costume choice revolving around the character and his or her decisions. It's the suit technology and the science behind it that make the mythos of Ant-Man possible, not some innate power Hank or Scott or Janet have. And that's why there are so many secrets hiding behind Ant-Man's suit.
Because his programming is based on the human mind. He himself is as flawed as us.
Ant-Man's IRL science consultant. Marvel hired a real science professor for consultation on Ant-Man, at least for the film version. Look, Marvel Comics is more science fiction than fantasy, but only just barely. Usually the scientific explanations for a given hero's power make Star Wars seem as realistic as C-SPAN. Normally we don't care, because in most fiction, it's the characters and their choices that matter to us the most. But for Ant-Man, the filmmakers over at Marvel Studios decided that a quantum-themed hero required a quantum physicist to lend a little more credence to the guy's suit. So they hired Professor Spiros Michalikis from the California Institute of Technology to help them explain Ant-Man's incredible abilities. Take Ant-Man's strength. Relative to his size, he actually gets stronger as he shrinks. According to Michalikis, that's due to the property called Galileo's square cube law, whereby if you shrink something, its volume would decrease much more than its mass and density. That helps to explain how black holes form when a star collapses on itself, but it also explains why Ant-Man has super strength. Sort of. Michalikis maintains that a real Ant-Man wouldn't have strength exceeding that of a normal human. He'd be able to lift normal objects, like Funko Pops, or the next issue of Ant-Man, or anything else cluttering your quantum-sized apartment. But he wouldn't be able to toss around cars, and his strength would actually diminish relative to his size if he grew bigger than normal. But we're sure that Dr. Michalikis was only hired to shade the Ant-Man films with a mere dose of scientific sense, rather than provide completely accurate constraints on what our hero is capable of. Anyway, before we get into all the specifics about why Ant-Man's suit is so awesome, we thought you might benefit from some insider knowledge on Marvel's overarching approach to Ant-Man.
You really shouldn't insult the synthezoids, Mr. Cannon. They're just doing their jobs.
Pym Particles. The genesis of Ant-Man begins with Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man. The whole saga begins when Pym, a scientist, discovers so-called Pym Particles, the matter responsible for letting Ant-Man shrink down to the size of, well, an ant. They accomplished this by contracting the space between subatomic particles, and this figures greatly into why the mythos of Ant-Man is kind of complicated. As we've already alluded to, Hank Pym, his family, and associates can't stop inventing bug-themed superheroes or villains based around the Pym particle technology. It even leads to a lot of switch-ups in the comics, as Hank, his wife Janet, his daughter Hope, and others swap superhero titles like kids trading Pokemon cards. For example, Hank Pym takes on the role of the Wasp in Secret Invasion Requiem Volume 1, Issue 1, in honor of Janet Van Dyne, his on-again, off-again wife in original Wasp, after she dies in battle. He's also taken on the role of Goliath a hero who uses Pym Particles to grow really big, instead of shrinking really small. And Yellowjacket, who is a totally separate character in the film, being the alias for his former protege turned rival, Darren Cross. And Scott Lang, like in the film, the comics depict him as someone who takes on the mantle of Ant-Man after Hank Pym decides he's getting too old for that sort of thing. Or when the writers decided that Hank Pym, as he currently appears in the Prime Marvel Universe, looks too old on screen for that kind of thing. Didn't stop Gandalf, but whatever. The point is, once again, that Ant-Man isn't really about Ant-Man specifically, but an underlying technology that makes heroes like Ant-Man or the Wasp possible. His helmet can kill him. Another dose of scientific realism revolves around Ant-Man's relationship with the world outside of his suit when he shrinks. In films like The Incredible Shrinking Man or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the characters don't experience many consequences to having been made smaller, beyond killer bugs in a week's journey across the backyard. Not so with Ant-Man. According to costume designer Sammy Sheldon, when Ant-Man shrinks, the air molecules outside of his suit become too big for the shrunken hero's lungs. Remove that helmet in shrink mode, and he's done for. It makes sense and puts limitations on Ant-Man's powers that could make the plot even more interesting going into Ant-Man and the Wasp. The design team even considered removing the tubes from Ant-Man's suit design because they're just too tempting to target for his enemy Yellowjacket. Presumably, those tubes supply Scott Lang, or Hank Pym as the case may be, with either Pym Particles, breathable air, or both. In the end, the designers decided to keep those tubes because they looked so cool, but it also means the tubes might matter in the film. Just try to forget that issue of Avengers, where Ant-Man shrinks down completely naked while in bed with Janet, if only for consistency's sake.
Does anyone have any orange slices?
Walks like an ant, talks like an ant. Ant-Man doesn't just shrink to the size of an ant, he can actually communicate with them. While only ants and not, say, pillbugs or termites is anyone's guess, but Termite Man or Pillbug Guy doesn't have the same ring, that's for sure. This ant chatting ability comes as a result of Hank Pym's EMP communication device. Now, if you've ever seen the original Ant-Man film, you'll know all about this. Scott Lang enjoys the loyal company of Anthony, a winged carpenter ant that acts as our hero's trusty steed. But in the comics, Hank Pym has a lot of trouble getting the ants he communicates with to trust him, much less pay attention to him. This is especially true of the bullet ant, the first species Pym tests the EMP communication device on after he's perfected his shrinking technology. In his laboratory, he throws a colony of these bullet ants next to a mock-up of an apartment building. When he tries to order the ants to check each room in the building, they willfully disobey him. When he shrinks down to their size to deliver his message face-to-face, one of the ants actually bites him. It's only when he helps them defeat a wayward centipede that the bullet ants come to trust him. Which was sort of a waste, because other ant species turn out to be more trusting anyways, like carpenter ants for example. Nice knowing you, Anthony.
In your face with science.
One glove makes you larger, one glove makes you smaller. Alice famously had no control over how big or small she got during her trip to Wonderland. It might have been a good idea to ask more questions before accepting those Eat Me cakes or drinking a random bottle of potion. Apparently, Hank Pym got the memo and designed Ant-Man's gloves to be able to precisely control how big or small the wearer of Ant-Man's suit can get. The gloves contain tubes, yay more tubes, full of shrinking serum. One button lets the wearer grow, the other lets them shrink. In the films, a handy touchscreen lets Scott Lang control the precise amount of growth or shrinking he needs to get the job done. In addition, a touchscreen on Ant-Man's wrist lets him control the exact amount of Pym Particles he'd like to use for a given task. This gives him more than the mere ability to grow and shrink in volume. It also lets him control his density and mass, which in turn affects how he can interact with the world around him in any size. More density means more shrink per unit volume, but less density means he won't sink to the bottom of a lake while wearing a high-tech metal suit. Ant-Man uses rapid shape-shifting abilities in the Clash of the Avengers to hide on Captain America's shield during a battle.
I really don't want to hurt you.
I wouldn't stress about it.
Colored by tragedy. The original Ant-Man film jumps between the present day, wherein Scott Lang meets Hank Pym, and Pym's younger days in the late 60s to early 70s, where he first invented his Pym particle technology. Because Hank loses his wife in a tragic accident, but not too tragic since it looks like Janet will appear in Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's understandable that the 70-something scientist would retreat into the ethos of his younger days, back when life was easier and the country was tearing itself apart over racism in Vietnam. Simpler times. Yeesh. Anyway, the costume designer, Sammy Sheldon, wanted Pym's backward-facing gestalt to be reflected in the suit design. His normal suit, you know, the boring garment you have to wear once a year, unless you're a banker, which would make it every day. Tweeds, oranges, stripes. Hank's normie getup is all about the retro feel and provides a huge contrast with his enemy, Darren Cross, who has a sleek, modern bluish suit only a well-heeled bully would wear. This subtle design choice also helps to form a contrast with the suit we actually care about, because the Ant-Man suit is the total opposite of how it was originally portrayed in the first 60s Ant-Man comics. Gone are the antenna and skin-tight jumpsuit. Those wiggly mandibles have been merged with the helmet's breathing apparatus. It's made of leather, not spandex, and while most Marvel costumes have been modernized from their mid-century pedigree for the new MCU films, Ant-Man's costume design is all the more interesting for its contrast with the style of its aging, sad creator.
I'm looking for a guy that shrinks. And I'm like, damn, I got all nervous because I keep mad secrets for you, bro.
Hidden insect heads. Check out this teaser promo for Ant-Man and the Wasp. Can you see them? No, not the ant Paul Rudd rides around on, nor his helmet. Check out the torso. Pay attention to the Wasp and Ant-Man's chest and upper abdomen. Remind you of anything? Those are insect heads. It's yet another subtle costume design choice that we nerds like to eat up like Ant-Man themed breakfast cereal. Credit goes to Louise Frogley, the costume designer for Ant-Man and the Wasp. She designed costumes for Iron Man 3, Spider-Man Homecoming, and now Ant-Man and the Wasp. As we can see, she's done an excellent job redesigning Ant-Man's costume, as well as creating the Wasp suit. She's made other changes too. Ant-Man's mandibles have been darkened, and the leather on his arms, sides, and legs have gone from dark blue to dark brown. What this will mean for the character is anyone's guess. Will it just be an aesthetic filmmaking choice, or will these changes actually mean anything? If it were any other character, we'd say the first option's more likely, but this is Ant-Man, where, once again, the costume itself is way more important. So, it's possible that these changes will reflect Hank Pym's evolving character arc. We guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Well handled, Scott.
Well handled?
Evil Ant-Man. When Marvel first brought the original Ant-Man film into development, they tapped Edgar Wright of Scott Pilgrim fame to direct. Wright had been developing an Ant-Man script with English comedian and writer Joe Cornish since '06, but in 2014, Marvel announced it was parting ways with Wright. No one went into details in the official announcement, but Wright later stated it was over creative differences. Well, here's a clue. Wright wanted to make Hank Pym the bad guy in Ant-Man. In Wright's original vision, Pym goes bad and becomes a villain called the Black Ant. And here's the costume design they were going to use before the rug was pulled out, or shrunk down, from under Wright. Now in the comics, Black Ant is actually an android, a so-called life model decoy, designed by S.H.I.E.L.D. to be a replica of their agent, Eric O'Grady. Not only does he possess all the powers of Ant-Man, he also has more innate strength and endurance because, well, he's a robot. Which begs the question, how would Wright have approached Black Ant in the first Ant-Man film? Would he have made Pym a robot the whole time? A reveal we only learn halfway through or near the end of the film? Or would he have simply turned evil as a result of the trauma he's experienced from losing his wife Janet? Maybe Yellowjacket would have provoked him. Either way, one would hope there would be more to his suit than it just being a darker, more menacing take on the original design. I guess that's one secret we'll never really know the answer to.
Of course. I should have recognized his work.
Well, there you have it. What do you think? Did any of these factoids surprise you? Is there a part of the suit that you wish we covered? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.